even though there's a case to be made that you could use an extra top 6 winger, I'm not really in on this. Where are you on the Conor Garland stuff?
So depending on the cost, I think they should at least be poking around, because I do think the Bruins have a need on wing. Being able to add Poitras to the lineup if he sticks past 9 games and bumping Geekie over to the wing, like, that helps. But I've kind of thought for a while that, like, this team is still a top 6 wing short, because I think James Van Riemsdyk at this point in his career is ideally a third liner on a really good team. Morgan Geekie, I think, is probably going to be ideally a bottom 6 forward, even though, Thursday night he's on a line with Poitras and Brad Marchand, which looks like the second line.
Yeah, by the way, we're recording this before the game Thursday night. We're not recording this at 1 a.m. on Thursday. So we're recording this prior. Yeah, this afternoon. Game has not happened yet. So
maybe those lines lasted through the game. Maybe they didn't. You never know with Jim Montgomery.
Who knows?
Bruins Beat is brought to you by Fanduel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat on CLNS Media. My name is Evan Marinofsky, and today we are here with WEEI.com's Scott McLaughlin. Scott, what is up?
Not much, Evan. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Good. Yeah, of course. I'm glad to have you. It's been a minute, but you've always been a loyal. Whenever I needed someone, you've always been more than happy to jump in, and I want you on more. So that's I think that's the big thing. But happy to have you. It's how was your summer?
Gotta get rid of Connor Ryan. Kick him to the curb. See ya.
Goodbye. Yep, exactly. One BU alum for another BU alum.
Exactly. My summer was good. Pretty relaxing. Didn't really do anything too crazy. Went up to Winnipesaukee a couple times, but it was nice.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. And it's funny, I think it was opening night, you had a take on Twitter that I feel compelled to bring up and to kind of hash out here, because I think it's interesting. You have, for a long time, correct me if I'm wrong, but for a long time you've been someone who said no more Kernkraft 400 for the goal song. You want something different, right? You want each player to have their own?
I think I've like been quietly have felt that way. I haven't been super vocal about it, but yeah, I kind of just think Zombie Nation Kernkraft 400 is a little outdated. And, they've had it for a long time, and I understand tradition, but with this already feeling like the start of a new era for the Bruins this year, feels like it'd be time to switch that up, right? Like, they got the new jerseys in, Bergeron Krejci retired, it's turning over to the Pasternak McAvoy era. Just feels like it's a good opportunity to kind of change up everything. The garden's gotten turned over in recent years. You got black seats now instead of yellow. Like, everything else has kind of changed and been updated, and that's still there. And I would say the reception to my tweet about it was overwhelmingly supportive of keeping the song. So I'm clearly in the minority here. But yeah, I gotta say I've never been like the biggest fan of it anyways, and it just sort of feels like stuck in its era. And obviously what set this off was the whole, Toronto Maple Leafs changing their goal song, getting rid of Hall & Oates. And that sort of turned into this whole like just like full-blown drama up there with all these different choices that they're trying to cycle through. So, maybe I should be careful what I wish for, because the Leafs seem to be having a heck of a time trying to get everyone on board with changing theirs.
Well, I don't think they'll ever do that successfully. It's if the Maple Leafs are turning against each other, I think we are happy. So I think it accomplished something. It's interesting because I agree with you from the standpoint of it's a new era, right? New things, new jerseys, the Garden, obviously, Hub Hall. Tim Thomas, I think, was even saying, like, last time I was here, none of this was here, which is a stark contrast from, what the Garden looked like 10 years ago. I've always loved it. I've always loved the song. I think there's a magnitude to it. It's a big moment. It feels big time. I know you disagree with me on this, but it just feels important. And it's one of the goal songs. There were a lot of goal songs that other teams would use. There were like 5 or 6, I feel like, in the 2000s that everyone kind of went through or used. I've always loved this one. I hope they keep it. I love the idea of a smaller market team or a non-original six team doing the players pick their song. But I was watching the Sabres, who'd they play the other night? It was nationally televised. They're playing someone. I forget who it was. And Jeff Skinner scored. And it was, the High School Musical thing. And it's cool and it's funny, but it's like in a big moment at the end of the season or in the playoffs, like, do I really want to be hearing that? Like, I don't know. I don't want to sound like 1,000 years old because it is funny and it's like good for Twitter. And I feel like someone my age should have the same take that you have. But I love Zombie Nation. I'm good with that. It feels big. So that's my take on it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the individual players thing, I don't know if I love that idea long term, but it would be sort of a good intermediary as you try to find the next full-time song is let players have that, and maybe you do that for half a season or something. But that is also a way to bring some sort of individuality into it. Obviously, I think of baseball, every pitcher has their song when they come out of the pen, every hitter has a walk-up song. Obviously there's not really anything like that in football or basketball, but it could.
The Patriots could have individual touchdown songs. Would have no idea.
True. Yeah. True. Not hearing those anytime soon.
No, we are not. But yeah, I know what you mean, and I agree. I think if you were to change it, or if you want to do a month or two of that, just to kind of freshen things up in the middle of the season when it's January and February and you need a little flair, I'm for that. I just, for the big moments, for the big goals, I like the song. I hope they don't change it. But I respect that you I respect that that's your opinion, because I like having those, I like those outside the box, going against the norm kind of things. I was saying 4 or 5 years ago, hey, I think it's time that they get, new home and away jerseys. Because they'd had them for a long time at that point, and this and that. And during the pandemic, I'd bring it up on the podcast a lot because what the hell else was there to talk about? But I liked it. I respect this. I think I like it. I disagree, but I like it.
Yeah, you gotta go against the grain sometimes, and when better to drop that take than 2 hours before opening night when everyone's feeling good and all the all Centennial team alums are back in town.
This is true. Yes, you dropped it at the perfect time. That's like that. Have you seen the NHL draft? Someone tweeted that it should be abolished. If that was tweeted 2 hours before the draft started, I think that would be just the perfect time to kind of light the flame on that. That's another take that I'm like, really? I don't know about that.
See that
yours a little more realistic.
I guess I'll just get all these out there, but I also support that one, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
What's your reasoning for that?
In all sports, I would abolish the draft. The draft rewards the worst teams, and I would rather see, if a Conor Bedard's coming up, I would rather see every team be able to make their pitch, offer him contracts, have Conor Bedard be able to cash in big time right away, have teams bidding on him. Which is that's obviously more of a European soccer approach. Every league in North America.
It's recruiting.
Yeah, every league in North America has a draft. So that's all, as pro sports fans, that's all we're used to. But yeah, it's comparable to recruiting for college sports, or the way that European soccer will, basically just have open bidding wars on players. Generally, I'm just pro player empowerment in general, so that's kind of where that comes from. It'll never happen as long as owners have as much control as they do in the NHL. So I don't think I don't expect it to happen anytime soon or anytime in my lifetime. But yeah, for an out there take though, I could get behind abolishing the draft.
What about the smaller market teams? I've seen a lot of people say that, and I know, you could say, oh, it's in college hockey, for instance, right? The big schools are going to get the Cole Isermans and the James Hagans of the world. What about, the smaller schools? And you could say, well, they get the transfer portal. So I guess in your model, the smaller schools, or not the smaller schools, the smaller market teams like Arizona and a Columbus would then they would just have more money to go for free agents. Is that kind of where your thinking lies on that?
Yeah, they'd obviously have to build differently, and it would be tougher. There's no doubt about it. But I don't like salary caps. I don't like owners having so much control over just basically trying to create parity, which benefits them and benefits like the league commissioner. And I see the argument for it even benefiting fans, right? Like you want to believe your team has a chance, even if your owner isn't willing to spend big money. But I'm sort of for a world where like players can just make what the market will pay them and not have salaries like so restricted across the board, because in the NHL right now, it's like no one even makes the maximum of what you could in theory make. Like I think right now the maximum that a player could make is like 16 or 16.5 million. It's like no one's even within like $3 million of that, which is insane. Think about like how many max contracts there are across the NBA. Like that's a league where, again, like there's some restriction on it, but the best players are making as much money as they are allowed to make under the NBA CBA. And it's just crazy that in the NHL, it's like Connor McDavid isn't even close to making as much as he could make under the CBA. So I think the NHL in particular is like extremely slanted against players being able to truly maximize their value. So I support things that would help would help them do that, but the owners just have so much power that it's not happening.
Well, you look at like Connor Bedard right now, and you see the amount that he's on, right? The amount of national TV games. I imagine when the jersey sales come out, he's going to be in the top 5, potentially number 1 or 2. You look at the amount of promotion that's around him, and it's like, what's he making? $850K, like right. $925K, like he does deserve more for what he is providing the league. But am I ready to give up the draft for it? Not quite there yet. Maybe I'm just an older way of thinking, and I need to be enlightened. Maybe we need to talk about this more. But this is a hell of an intro to a podcast. We've gone through 2 crazy hot takes to start, so we're off and running, Scott. This is great.
I know this isn't even usually my style, but yeah, you've touched on 2 topics that'll bring it out. So
that's like just immediately from the jump, just like not even easing you in. Like let's just let's hammer this out. What do we think of these top current events? But one thing I want to hit on, and it's not, again, this isn't super Bruins related. People are probably punching their steering wheels like, get to the Bruins, get to the point. The draft doesn't even matter for the Bruins, who currently don't have a first or second round pick unless they're going to be unless they're in the top 10. Then I guess they get their pick back. But I don't foresee that being the case this year. One guy who's been in the news quite a bit lately is Conor Garland, right winger from Vancouver. He's always been a guy linked back here because he's from Scituate. So, of course, Bruins got to get every local guy they can. Now, the Bruins have not been mentioned in the Garland sweepstakes at all. I have yet to see their name pop up at all through it. So, there's no links. But there are lots of people saying the Bruins got to bring him back, bring him back to Boston. The Bruins got to get him in as in their top 6. And even though there's a case to be made that you could use an extra top 6 winger, I'm not really in on this. Where are you on the Conor Garland stuff?
So depending on the cost, I think they should at least be poking around, because I do think the Bruins have a need on wing. Being able to add Poitras to the lineup if he sticks past 9 games and bumping Geekie over to the wing, like that helps. But I've kind of thought for a while that like this team is still a top 6 wing short, because I think James Van Riemsdyk at this point in his career is ideally a third liner on a really good team. Morgan Geekie, I think, is probably going to be ideally a bottom 6 forward, even though, Thursday night he's on a line with Poitras and Brad Marchand, which looks like the second line.
Yeah, by the way, we're recording this before the game Thursday night. We're not recording this at 1 a.m. on Thursday. So we're recording this prior. Yeah, this is afternoon. Game has not happened yet. So
maybe those lines lasted through the game. Maybe they didn't. You never know with Jim Montgomery.
Who knows?
But I don't see Geekie sticking that high in the lineup long term. So, yeah, I would be open to potential upgrades on the wing. The problem is obviously that, the Bruins are already cap strapped, so it would have to be a hockey trade. You're probably looking at trading a defenseman. That's been the rumor that the Canucks want a defenseman, but then they just went out and traded for Mark Friedman from Pittsburgh. So did that address their need? Do they still want another defenseman? And obviously the names you look at would be Matt Grzelcyk, Derek Forbort. No idea if there's interest on the Canucks end in those guys. But again, I think it's worth poking around. It would be hard for me to see how it actually works out for the Bruins right now. It seems like something that they'd, explore later in the season towards the trade deadline if Garland were still available then. But all the reporting, from your Elliot Freemans of the world is that the Canucks want to get this done sooner rather than later. So if someone else pounces, and there's been other teams mentioned, Columbus, Nashville have popped up. If someone else is going to go get him now, then, he's not going to be there for the Bruins. I don't see them being the team that pounces on it right now.
Yeah, realistically, I don't see this happening. Now, should it? That's where, again, if it was a Grzelcyk for Garland deal, because even if, let's say, I don't think that gets it done, but let's say it's Grzelcyk for Garland, right, straight up. Is Lowry ready to come in and be an every night defenseman for you in a third pairing role? I don't think he's quite there yet. I still think you want him to have time in Providence. Are you throwing Zaboral in there? I mean, again, Grzelcyk right now is in your top 4 and is fine. I mean, he's not, doing anything crazy, but he's holding his own, and he's with McAvoy a solid top 4 defenseman. There's nothing wrong with that. So, I mean, is that worth giving up to put Garland in the top 6? I don't know. I hesitate to do that. I agree with you in the sense that I don't think Geeky sticks up there. Van Riemsdyk, again, past his prime. I don't know if you want him in there, especially if you're going to be a playoff team. I don't know if that's the guy you want in your top 6. I mean, do you foresee Frederick going up there? Do you move a Coyle to the wing? That is a problem I think this team's going to have to address, and we're going to kind of hit on this in a second, of what do you do in your top 6? This would obviously balance it out. The only way I could see it happen, the only way I would be okay with it, and first before I get to that, I want to have a little word from our sponsor. So I got to tease it a little bit before we get to that. So quick, a word from our sponsor.
Been to action this NFL season with Fanduel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
So I don't think this is what Vancouver wants, but if it was something like a Lysell for a Garland, again, you mentioned it has to be a hockey trade because of the cap, but in a perfect world, if it could be like a Lysell for a Garland, I would be more open to that. Because again, I think you're hoping Fabian Lysell gets to Conor Garland's level in the future. And, again, Lysell's coming off kind of a rough camp, not the greatest year last year. I don't foresee that happening. Again, I don't think realistically, I don't think he comes here, just given the other teams involved and what they have to trade. But if you did a Lysell for Garland straight up, I don't know. What do you think of that?
I'd be hesitant. I think my expectations for Lysell have been lowered a little bit, but not so much that that I'm viewing him as like a second tier prospect or anything. I still think he's a pretty high end prospect. And if I'm the Bruins, I still want to see what he does this year in the AHL and see if he had a really strong first half of the season last year, right? And then he faded down the stretch and had a tough World Juniors. I want to see if he can start playing like the player he was the first half of last year and sustain that, because if you're trading him right now, it does kind of feel like you're trading a depreciated asset a little bit.
You're selling low.
Yeah, and I don't really have much interest in doing that for a player who's so young, who was a first-round pick. So even though, yes, Garland is, a pretty well-established middle six, 5-on-5 scorer, that's his strength, I'd be hesitant to do that. And again, you've kind of touched on it, but if you're the Bruins, I just think the timeline's not going to match up if the Canucks want to do something right away, because the Bruins I think they want to see how some things play out. First off, you want to see if Poitras is going to stick past 9 games. You want to see how Lori does down in Providence. And, is he going to be ready for a call-up 15 games into the year or 50 games into the year? That changes the calculations on whether you're willing to trade a Grizzly or forward. So I think the Bruins will be more active in the trade market towards the trade deadline, assuming that they're a playoff team in contention. Right now, I think you're going to see them wait things out and see how they go. So that may very well take them out of the running for Garland. I think the good news is that there does always tend to be more wingers available than centers and top 4 caliber defensemen. So, it's tempting to sit there and say they should go after Garland. He'd be a good fit, all this. But I think come February, March, there will be another Garland-esque player who's on the market. And you can, whether it's a rental, someone with term, whatever it might be, you can target that player then if you need to.
I also, the other reason I'm not super in on dealing for Garland, and I think it stretches across trades in general, is they can't be trading away futures, or high-end prospects quite yet. Again, Lysell had a down camp. If you really wanted to do the 1-for-1, I could maybe get around to it. But again, I'm not ready to deal big-time prospects, future draft picks for this roster because there's so much, you hit it. There's so much we don't know about this roster. And I think, you look at guys like, Van Riemsdyk, Geeky. I mean, he's in the top 6 Thursday night. We'll see what he looks like. I think he's a little slow. I know there is some upside there, and I am curious to see if he hits it. We won't know if he hits it or not if they go out and deal for a guy like Garland. So, and I'm not my outlook right now is I'm not even at the point of they need to go all in at the deadline. We're months away, but it would not surprise me if they had a quiet deadline because, the team they've got, we'll see, So, you hit there a little bit. Poitras. I want to talk to you about Poitras because you and I we've not discussed him yet, at least publicly. I don't know if we have in the press box or anything, but
I try not to talk to you, Evan, so probably not. No.
We try to save our conversations for this. My mom, who listens to this, is going to be like, does Scott really not want to talk to you? Wow, he's a real dick. And I'll say, he is. It's crazy. Poitras. What have you thought of him through camp, through the first few games, and what is your sort of outlook on him going into this West Coast trip?
Yeah, he looks like a player who so far has not shown me anything to suggest that he doesn't belong or that he can't handle it. The playmaking and the poise of the puck is obvious, and people see that, with the assist he had on opening night where he pulls up, makes the nice pass over to Carlo. That stuff is very obvious and easy to see, but it's all the little things that he's doing well. Jim Montgomery's highlighted his puck support, the way he just is always in the right position for his teammates to help them win battles, to help dig out a puck, to be the outlet when someone else digs out the puck. He's gone to the net front and stopped there, and he's a smaller player. He's going to take a beating there, but he's been willing to do it, and that's been a big point of emphasis from Montgomery this year is, he not for shots from the point, he wants not 1 but 2 forwards at the net front, and Poitras's been one of those guys pretty consistently when he's been out there. He's getting power play time in the second unit, and we've seen him, more so in preseason, but we've seen him make some plays out there on the power play too. That really plays to his strength in terms of him being able to have time and space to survey the ice. So, you're seeing a lot of good things for him, and he looks to me like a player who's going to stick around. And I think moving him up to a line with Marchand is smart. One, I think you would want to see him in a role like that before you make your final decision anyways at that 9-10 game mark. But two, it just feels like with all due respect to like Trent Frederick and Morgan Geekie, who are perfectly fine players and have some finishing, Frederick especially, you give a playmaker like Poitras a Marchand, and I think it raises your offensive ceiling and, creates more – it allows more of his chances to be finished with goals and not go by the wayside. And that feels like the optimal way to use him. And honestly, like the optimal way to use Marchand, because so far the first two games that Marchand Coyle DeBrusk line was being used really more as like a shutdown matchup line, and they were doing a good job of that. But as a result, they weren't really getting as many offensive chances and spending as much time in the O-zone as you would like Marchand and DeBrusk to spend there. Like, those are two of your most talented wingers. You want them at that end of the ice getting scoring chances. So I think this whole lineup shuffle helps kind of strike a better balance, and it gives Poitras a more talented winger. It puts Marchand into some more offensive situations. So it's going to be really interesting to see. And if he does well there, he was doing well in the third line. If he does well here, it's like, their mind might end up being made up before they even get to 9 games. Like, he's not giving them any reason to send him back.
He's just so smart. I mean, you just can see it. You hit it on some of the always in the right position for his teammates, supports the puck well, good in his own zone. Like, he's a Bruins center. Like, that is a Boston Bruins center. And I think, you look at guys like Marchand, DeBrusk, those guys with the loss of Bergeron, Krejci, Bertuzzi, Hall, those guys you need them producing at 5-on-5. And Charlie Coyle's terrific. He's an outstanding defensive center, puck possession center, great shutdown guy, a really good shutdown guy. And I think he'll still kind of stay in that role with Van Riemsdyk and Frederick. Because again, I think that's a third line to me that I think if you're contending for playoffs and contending for a cup, that's a good solid third line to have in Van Riemsdyk, Coyle, and Frederick. But you need Marchand and DeBrusk producing. And we're not sold yet on Coyle producing with those guys. There hasn't been much through, obviously, the first 2 games. I know it's only been 2 games, and it's the first 2 games of the season. But I just think Poitras' playmaking ability and his offensive abilities and just his overall skill mesh better with those two. Now, obviously, he's got Geekie on his right still, last I checked, for Thursday night's game. So, again, we'll see how that plays out and if Poitras can unlock some offense with Geekie next to Marchand. But I think in a perfect world, like, I would love to see, Poitras potentially between a Marchand and a DeBrusk. Because I think kind of an all-offensive line like that would be solid. And I think we probably will see it. Montgomery will continue to shift these lines around. I don't think this top 6 is close to being set in stone. It's too early for that. There's too many question marks. Overall, the 5-on-5 scoring, what is it, 2 goals in 2 games? So nothing great there. But San Jose, LA, Anaheim, Chicago coming up. You have 3 out of 4 of those games are really good chances to get going. By the way, San Jose, what a roster. Oh my God. that is barren. Woo.
Hello, Macklin Celebrini or Cole Iserman. Like, this roster is awful. And if they've played 3 games so far, and prior to this Bruins game, through their first 3 games, they were getting outshot by an average margin of 42-20.
That's incredible.
It's like laughably awful.
We'll continue.
I was just going to say, one last thing on Poitras, too, is he's just going to keep getting better defensively, too, because he played a completely different defensive system in Guelph. So, the way the Bruins play, like, what he was doing in Guelph was a lot more kind of straight line aggressive and, just like everyone coming back to the puck, and didn't have as many layers, didn't have as many handoffs in the D zone. And like, the more he learns all that stuff, he's just going to look better and better.
100%. And I just, my only hesitation with him is just the injury element of it. He has no problem going to dirty areas, no problem kind of taking a beating. You saw Jeremy Lozon kind of smush him up against the glass, and at the end of that game against Nashville, and there was a play where it was a power play, and Geeky kind of had to tell him like, hey, go to the high slot. I'm in front of the net. And he was kind of winced over, and he went back to the bench like that. Again, I assume he's fine, but I think that's the only hesitation of like, can he sustain 82 games of this? I think he can. I think he's smart enough to get out of those situations and not always put himself in the position to get killed. But again, I think it's just something to keep an eye on. I think he sticks. I think he sticks. I just think he's been too good through 2 games, and I think he's only, as you said, I think he's only going to get better. And it's a godsend, by the way. It's a freaking godsend to this team. You mentioned San Jose. Little aside, if they do get Celebrini in this draft, you got Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini as your number 1 and 2 centers down the middle for the future. That's pretty good. That's not too bad. That is not bad at all.
Yeah, does that make Tomas Hertl available in a potential trade again?
He's finally coming to Boston. He's finally coming to Boston. It's finally happening. Tomas Hertl to Boston, just like we talked about years ago. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna. This trip's interesting. Again, I'm also curious to see what LA is like. Not the city, the team. I've seen the city. I will not be there for those games, but I'm curious to see PL Dubois and that whole new refined team. So I'm interested in it.
Yeah, and from the Poitras perspective, like LA will be a really good test because he's going to be facing a good center, no matter what line he's matched up again. Like the Kings are as deep at center as any team in the NHL with Dubois, Kopitar, Dano. Like it's so there's no easy matchup. There's no hiding anyone, which is good. Like you want. The Bruins have sort of like a weird early season schedule, and they're not facing too many of the deepest teams in the league, but that'll be a good test.
Really good test, and I'm curious to see how it works out. And Scott, before you head out, what can the people look forward to from you? I know you have the Skate podcast, you have consistent content. What can the people kind of look forward to? More coverage. We're doing 3 skate pods a week, so people. Wild. Yeah, people can check those out. Consistent coverage off, every game. Lots of off-day stuff, too, on WEEI.com. So, yeah, all the good stuff there. All the fixins. Well, Scott, I appreciate you coming on. Love to have you on again. And that has been this episode of Bruins Beat. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.
The CLNS Media Network is powered by Fanduel. Sign up at FanDuel.com/Boston. And get in on the action with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed.
When you place a $5 bet, that's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose.